I've been thinking about the nature of sin for a while now, how it influences our thinking, our actions, things like that. And I think the best place to start is the story of Adam and Eve. God created everything we know. It was good. And he created Adam and Eve, the garden, and he placed them in there. And a couple of things I want us to focus on, right? It says they were naked and not ashamed. And secondly, he told them they can eat of every tree except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? At this point, the only frame of thinking, the only ideas their mind could entertain is what God had told them. So anything outside of that would have been foreign, right? Keep that in mind because it will become relevant as we move forward. So in Genesis chapter 3, it says the serpent came and he asked them an interesting question. And this is all he said. Has God really said that you shouldn't eat of any tree in the garden? I think that question is very strategic. That question did two things. Remember, even to conceive the question would have been crazy. So that question in itself opened up their minds to think outside of what they already knew. That in itself just sort of forced them outside of their reality. That any tree was also a plant in the question to force them to think outside of what they already knew. Because God said they can eat of every tree except the one. But now the devil said any tree. So now you're engaging with the thought and you're forced to think outside of what you know, right? And you can kind of tell that in her response. She basically said like, no, we can eat of every tree except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And she even added a little bit of sauce to it. It's like, we can't even touch it, right? And that kind of points to the visceral reaction that she had, how appalled she was by what the devil said, because the idea was just so wild, outside of her frame of thinking. But here's the problem. She engaged with what the devil was saying. And that's exactly what the devil was counting on. The moment she engaged, what did he do? He told her, oh no, that's not what God wants. That's not what God said. He doesn't want you to eat the tree, because if you eat the tree, you become like him, knowing good and evil. What did that do? All of a sudden, Eve saw that the tree was good for eating. Now, keep in mind, this is the exact same person who said, God said we shouldn't eat nor touch it. So what changed? The devil planted the idea. She engaged with the idea, and now her perspective changed. Now, what was good is all of a sudden bad. And this is basically the layers through which sin engages with us. It always starts with a thought, right? And God's thought is always going to be right there with it. But the question is, what are you going to engage with? What are you going to meditate on? Because what you meditate on will eventually lead to actions. And that's exactly what happened with Adam and Eve. They all of a sudden saw it was good, then they ate it, and then they died. And there are a few things that's interesting that happened after. All of a sudden, they realized that they were naked and they were ashamed of the nakedness. And the last thing is, they were running from God. Now, I understand that talking about the shame might be a little bit foreign to this generation because we drink iniquity like water nowadays, and our minds are so skewed that we can't even tell what we should feel terrible about. You know, I remember I was looking at I saw something in the news about someone being killed, and I didn't have an innate response. I just kind of like, people die. And the problem for me was I had seen so much death that hearing another story about death didn't even move me. And that's what I mean, right? Because we're so desensitized to sin, the idea of shame may seem foreign to you. But for the regenerate Christian who has chosen to love God and pursue his ways, sin always produces shame. And the last thing is, you always want to run away from God because sin is incongruent with God's nature. There's a wisdom about sin that tries to pull you away from God, right? And you see all of those things happen in the story of Adam and Eve, right? He planted the idea, their perspective changed, they took the action, and what was their primal instinct? To hide and run. And last and finally, accountability. When God came to ask them about it, what they say? Adam said, nope, not me, it was Eve. And what did Eve say? It was the serpent. Sin always wants to take away accountability. I know you might think that this is crazy, but let me give you an example. If you're speeding and get pulled over and you go to court, do you want to go to jail? If you lie and you get caught, do you feel like, you should be shamed for it or be held to account? Or even if you cheat on your wife and you get caught, do you feel like she should leave you? No. Your visceral response is, I don't want to deal with the consequences. I want my wife. I mean, you lied about it in the first place because you wanted to avoid the consequences. And that's the nature of sin. It always starts in the mind, and the more you meditate on it, it's always going to lead to action. God bless you.